Hi everyone. So today I want to talk a little bit about homing moves in Tekken. Now, the typical way that we approach homing moves as moves that are specifically designed to beat an opponent that's sidestepping, right? So if June, for example, uses her forward 4 here and I sidestep, boom, I get hit, right? And if I, with Lydia, use core circle forward 4 and they try sidestepping, obviously they get hit. And there are a lot of homing moves in this game that are plus on block and give a guaranteed follow-up afterwards. So, like with Lydia, for instance, she gets the 4 in season 1, she got 1, 2, 2. June gets heat engager with 1+2 afterwards. And this is fairly common. Leroy, for example, his high homing move gives him a heat engager guaranteed on normal hit. And so this can be very frustrating because these are also plus on block. So it feels like it kind of is just preventing you from being able to sidestep in general in neutral, because if you get caught out sidestepping, then the opponent who's doing a homing move gets such a big reward out of it, while also being plus on block, that it just doesn't really feel worth it sometimes. And it creates an issue where we wonder about like the balance of these moves and why they're balanced this way and they feel a little bit too powerful, etc., etc. But then the problem also becomes when you are the person using these moves, it can also be frustrating because, of course, step blocking exists in this game. And this is something I talked about in my last video, but if I have this June do this same sequence and I step block, I'm just completely blocking that move, while at the same time, if I set June up to do like jab into down forward 1 maybe, then I'm also going to simultaneously avoid that and then be able to punish her for doing that, right? So while we're using these homing moves, we can throw them out if we have a read that the opponent is going to sidestep, but if they are mindful about this sidestepping into defense when they're step blocking, homing moves are actually very rarely going to hit a sidestepping opponent. And I believe this is the balancing decision around why a lot of homing moves are plus on block and give so much reward on normal hit, because sidestepping is so strong in this game, and therefore step blocking is so strong in this game, that the homing moves have to do something on block in order to be useful. If your turn just ended because they were -9 or something, then they wouldn't really serve much of a purpose. And you notice a lot of these homing moves as well that give some sort of guaranteed follow-up do have other limitations toward them. One thing is that typically they're highs. The other thing is that they're usually a bit slower. Like June's here is 19 frames. Oops, sorry, I have the wrong one. June's here is 19 frames. Lydia's is 17, but requires a core circle forward input, so of course it's going to be a little bit more. In this case, it's adding an additional 13 frames on top of that, so 30 frames. And so when you look at homing moves that are maybe a little bit faster, like Lydia's back 4, for instance, it's not going to do anything special on normal hit, and on counter hit, it's just going to give knockdown or something. If you're looking at the mids that are, or if you're looking at homing moves that are mids, these moves are typically either going to be punishable or they're going to end your turn. And in the case of both of these kind of moves, they're not going to be plus on block or anything like that. So there is pretty consistent balancing behind a lot of the moves. And of course, one of the things with like mid homing moves is that the opponent can't step duck it. With faster homing moves like this, it's hard for the opponent to step guard it. But then with the slow ones that give you better reward on normal hit, these are easiest step block, these are easier to defend against, while still having big punishment if the opponent like ducks it in the same way as back 4. Another important thing with these moves as well is that they don't leave you very plus on block, right? So for example, June could do this, and then if I try attacking in, she could do magic 4 or something, right? But the thing is, if I step block here again, then I'm able to avoid that, right? And even if I duck, because most of these moves that are going to be able to frame trap are highs, if I have the right read based on the frame trap situation, I might be able to duck and launch punish. So all of this is coming with some sort of risk. And so the question then becomes, what's a different way that you can think of these homing moves to maybe utilize them in a way that's a little bit more abstract than just simply trying to beat an opponent that's sidestepping? Because there are so many drawbacks to using homing moves against again, an opponent who has good fundamental defense, that sometimes it can feel like, even though the moves are powerful on paper, in a practical game setting, you might be better off using other moves. And the answer I have to that is that you're using these moves not to track an opponent's sidestep sometimes, but instead you're using them as moves that can hit the opponent while they are sidestepping. Now, this may not sound like a big distinction at first, but it is. For example, with Lydia, this is a very, very simple example to follow, and that's why I'm using Lydia right now. Her core circle forward 4 here, why? Her core circle forward 4 here goes into horse at +5. Forward 2 also goes into horse at +5. So we are getting the exact same situation if either of these moves are blocked. The thing is, though, if we do forward 2 after, say, back 1, for instance, and again, the opponent's being very mindful of their defense and they sidestep or they step block, then our forward 2 is going to whiff. Like that, right? And now we're like out in the open, we can get launched, but if we do core circle forward 4 here, then if they don't step block, obviously that's going to hit. But even if they do step block, it's the same thing as doing the forward 2. Now, there are other risks that come with this, though, and this is what makes it important to determine why you want to use these homing moves in these specific situations, because for Lydia, there are 2 key differences here. One is that this is a high and not a mid. So if they duck, like if they think you're going to do a low, like down 2, for instance, and they duck for that, and you end up doing core circle forward 4 and whiffing, boom, you get launched. The other thing is, too, if the opponent jabs you out of it, because you're in a floating state, or you're in an airborne state, you get floated, and then you get full combo. So there are other risks that come with doing some of these homing moves as well. June is another example where we can say, hold on one second, let me set this up. I didn't have this up in advance. Okay, so as an example with June, let's say she does sidestep 4, right? So if she does sidestep 4 here, then of course she's +6. She has a couple of options that she's able to frame trap with. What I'm going to be showing here for this example is if she does 4, then we get counter hit and then she gets a guaranteed follow-up, right? The thing is, though, even though June is +6, we still have the ability to sidestep some of her moves. And if we do that, then boom, she can get launch punished, right? So what you can do instead, in this case, if you know that the opponent is going to sidestep and you want something to be able to keep up that pressure, is you can do forward 4 instead. Because if we sidestep here, then we're able to continue our pressure because it's +3. If we catch the opponent not step blocking and we hit them like this, then of course we get the guaranteed follow-up heat engager, and it allows us to be able to continue on our pressure while constantly threatening heat engagers. Of course, though, the problem with this is now this starts losing to some sort of interrupt, right? So if I do something like this, or if I do my own magic 4 trade, so think Steve, if he does back 1, then that's going to cause June to get launched here. Those are scenarios that we do have to think about. Down jab is another universal option to beat both of these. Then June might start using her down forward 1, but then we also have the same sort of sidestepping problem from there, right? If June does, yeah, they are set to block here. June does this into down forward 1. I believe that you can step this. Should be able to, and if you can, unfortunately you can't, so it's not going to be the best example. You can parry it, though, so that is something that you can do here. But also think if June was like, say, you know, +2, +3, right? Does the same thing, then you could sidestep the down forward 1, and then that's where the homing move can come into play, right? We're not using this move necessarily to hit the opponent while sidestepping, but we're using it as a way to continue our offensive pressure without the opponent being able to sidestep, right? In the same way that if the opponent is, like, ducking after we do this because they think, oh, like I'm going to do a high sword, which is going to duck and then launch, then you would start using your mids, right? Then you would start using with June like forward 1+2 here. So let's just set up that example as well. So we would do this and then maybe something like this and then keep our offensive pressure going, because if the opponent's ducking here, then boom, that hits, right? But also this is another case where it's like if they do this mid, we can sidestep it and then we get launched. So that's why we might want to use the forward 4 instead. Again, not to track their sidestep, but to continue our pressure because the opponent cannot sidestep that move. So when I think about this with Lydia, I mentioned one of the scenarios I'm thinking of, but I'm also thinking about it with like my down back 3, right? Because this is a fully homing low, if my opponent is sidestepping when I approach, which is very common with Lydia because a lot of people believe that Lydia is a linear character, which the nice thing about down back 3 being a homing move is that they cannot sidestep it, right? So if they cannot sidestep it, then what that's forcing is for the opponent to do something like step duck, like this. And so if the opponent is step ducking, then of course that's going to be something that beats us, but it's the only way that you can simultaneously try avoiding, if I could get this to work, 1 second, by forward 2, while also fuzzing for my down back 3 at long range, right? But then if the opponent starts doing that, because they're thinking of this move that they cannot sidestep, then I can run up, back 1, because it realigns. And so this is another way to think of tracking moves. Tracking doesn't only come in the form of homing moves. There are a bunch of moves in this game that realign with an opponent's sidestep. So for example, if I do forward 2 here immediately, it's not going to realign. But if I delay it, then you can see it realigns. Same with back 1. I do it immediately, it doesn't realign. If I delay it, it does realign. However, there are some moves that do not do this. Like for example, running, is it running 3? Oh God. Was it running 1? Actually need to change this for a sidewalk, so that's easier to show for demonstration purposes. The step duck doesn't make this work as well. But if I do like running 3 here, it doesn't matter if I delay it. See how it can just be sidewalked? But if I do running 1, you see how that will realign with the opponent's sidewalk, right? So there are moves in this game that have pseudo tracking. There are moves in this game that aren't homing, but the opponent cannot sidewalk them. If you delay these moves, then they will realign with your opponent's movement. And it's important to know these moves because using those moves in conjunction with your homing moves, like we see in the step duck example, makes your offense a lot trickier to deal with, because now you're not just using like the homing highs or the homing lows or whatever, and you're only sticking with like the homing mids, or maybe you have a couple of moves that might track to your weak side but don't do as much. Knowing what these moves are that realign complements your ability to use these moves that the opponent cannot sidestep very well, because essentially, when you delay these moves, they also become homing moves. They also become moves that the opponent cannot sidestep if you have the right read, just to a lesser extent. And so most characters have examples of this that I can demonstrate. So I'm going to give you one last demonstration here with Elisa, just to sort of get the gears turning a little bit more. This is a character I'm more familiar with because I used to play her in Tekken 7. But with Elisa, there are a couple of things that we can look at here. We can look at a situation like if the opponent does something that is punishable, or not punishable, but minus. So let's say with June, she does like down forward 1 and then sidesteps here, right? So if June does this and I try jabbing, of course, that's going to get sidestepped, and then we can potentially get launched for doing this, right? I do 1, 2, that gets sidestepped. But what I can do if I want to try tracking this June from sidestepping is something like back 3, right? Very common thing. The problem though is because this is a homing mid, like we talked about before, it's -8. Most homing mids are going to cause you to lose your turn. But the thing is, Elisa has a faster homing move that she can utilize here. She can use 4. And because this is 13 frames, it becomes a lot harder to step block properly. And if we're step blocking very fast like this, it's going to allow Elisa to be able to hit the opponent with more moves because they're not sidestepping as much. So even though we're not necessarily fishing for counter hit or maybe even trying to hit the opponent sidestepping at all, this is just giving us an opportunity with our frames, because this will trade with a jab, and of course Elisa will get a guaranteed follow-up here if it trades with a jab, to be able to use those frames to try starting some sort of pressure without putting us at the risk of getting sidestepped. So yeah, if I have the June here set up to do like down, oop, that wasn't right, down forward 1 into jab here, let's just get hit by, or sorry, let's block this and then do this. You can see that trades and then we get guaranteed follow-up, right? But then, like we showed before, if they try sidestepping, then boom, we can hit them unless they step guard perfectly. And then the problem becomes after they do this, well, then what if they duck? And of course, Elisa has plenty of options to be able to catch an opponent ducking that are also safe, like back 1 and forward 2. But then the problem becomes, past that, well, what if they sidestep again, right? So what if we do the same example where if they down forward 1, and then they sidestep? Because if we do something like forward 2, this is going to whiff, where if we do back 1, this is going to whiff. So what can we do with these moves? Well, we have to understand sort of the reason why we're doing forward 2 in the first place, and one of the main reasons is because it puts us in DES. And so when this move hits, we're able to start mixing the opponent, right? We can do all of our like dual boot shenanigans here by doing this and all of that, right? So that's sort of what we're aiming for. That's the game plan. We do forward 2 on our turn. It's a fairly safe mid. It's like -2 on block or something, -4. It has that follow-up that the opponent has to be careful of, which kind of stops them from doing anything or sidestepping or anything like that. It makes them a little bit scared of doing that, and that's what allows us to facilitate our offense. But again, if the opponent is sidestepping here, then it makes it very difficult to actually utilize this because we're just going to get launched for trying to do this. I was going to say even if we do the follow-up, it's going to whiff. I was wrong about that, but we're still going to get launched in between it. So what do we do instead? Well, Elisa has another homing move besides like 4 or back 3, right? So we can use the 4 here, but if the June is going to sidestep, or again, if we use the previous example of sidestep and duck here, I guess I don't have a big enough side. There it is. If she sidesteps and ducks, then of course that's going to beat this, and it's potentially going to beat if we do the 4, if they time it very well. So what else can we do? Well, we can do back 3 if we want. That's absolutely something that we can do. But it's leaving us a little bit more open because 1, it's slow, it's 20 frames, 2, it causes us to lose a turn. So it's not facilitating the same kind of thing that we want to achieve with something like forward 2. But Elisa has another homing move on top of all of that, and that's forward 4. Now, forward 4 isn't as strong as forward 2, but forward 4 has a full string that has a follow-up. Now, granted, it's a high, so of course, it's going to be more riskier because it is a homing move. But the other thing it does is it puts Elisa in DES if she just does the first hit. So in a similar vein as forward 2, the opponent is going to be more wary of attacking into her or doing anything because this follow-up exists. It's kind of achieving the same thing as forward 2, where it's putting us into DES. So if the opponent here step ducks, then we can either choose to do the full string, or if we want to play it a little bit safer, we can choose to go into DES, and then same thing if they step block, right? The nice part about this too is because it's 16 frames, it's hard for the opponent to step block, but if I try doing this, they might not even be step blocking at all with how I have this recorded. But even on block, right, this is -9. So it's not the best on block, but it's a way to be able to beat that sidestep and that step duck. And again, the reason why is because unlike forward 2, this is a move that they cannot sidestep. So we're not necessarily doing it just to track the opponent sidestepping or whatever, because we have other moves for that. It's a move that they can't sidestep, and if we catch them sidestepping and they don't step block in time, then boom, this is going to hit. And then the other nice thing about this too, after like a down forward 1, is that June is -3 here as a 16 frame move, so it would trade with 13, right? Which isn't like amazing, of course, but just to serve as an example, if the June chooses to do like a 14 or 15 or 16 frame move, like let's say that the June tried doing a low as an example afterwards, then this would beat that, right? Whereas something like back 3 probably wouldn't, because it would trade with a 17 frame move. So those are a couple of examples of homing moves and another way to think about them. Some examples of how to think about homing moves not as just a way to purely beat the opponent sidestepping, but instead using them as moves that the opponent can't sidestep, how it can complement your other tools, and how it can be a good choice for using them instead of other tools depending on specific situations and how the opponent is defending against you in these situations that I demonstrated in this video. Anyway, hope you like this one. Hope it helps you out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.